My name is Kismet, and you already know when I show up, it's never with a quiet story. Today, we're diving deep into the kind of story that will pull at your very soul, wrapping itself around your heart until you can't breathe, can't think, can't escape. It's a story filled with betrayal, heartbreak, impossible love, and a darkness that refuses to let go. This is no ordinary tale. It will haunt you, linger in the shadows of your mind, and leave you questioning every whisper in the night. Are you ready? Because this story, like every story I bring, is not for the faint of heart. This isn't mine to tell. It's someone else's, a woman who thought she could escape, thought she could outrun her past. But the thing is, when you've been marked by a fate so cruel, no matter how far you run, the shadow always follows. Imagine this. You've been cast out, banished from everything you ever knew, rejected by the one person who was supposed to love you unconditionally. You were the alpha's mate, his chosen one, until the moment your power became too much for him to control. You were abandoned, left to wander alone, broken, shattered. Your heart, torn between wanting to escape and the unshakable pull that keeps you bound to the one who hurt you. But even in the deepest silence, you can feel it. His shadow. You can hear it in the wind that howls through the trees at night. You can taste it in the stillness that surrounds you. He's coming. The mark he left on you, the bond you can never fully sever, it burns brighter with each passing second. You thought you escaped, didn't you? You thought you outran it all, the pain, the betrayal, the impossible love. But there's no escape. He's out there. And tonight at midnight, the shadow that you thought you left behind will find you once more. Only this time, the price will be higher, because he's come to claim what's his. Do you hear that? The wind. It's not just the storm. It's him, the Alpha. His presence presses in on you, darker than the shadows, colder than the chill in the night air. You run. But it's as if the earth itself is pulling you back. The storm, raging against your body, against your mind, reflects the storm that rages inside you. The power, the bloodline, it all leads you back to him, no matter how hard you try to forget. But there's no forgetting, not with him. The mark, the power, it never truly leaves you. This is not a love story. It's not a fairy tale. This is the story of a woman who thought she could escape a love too dangerous to survive, a love that tore her world apart, only to realize the truth. Some bonds are not meant to be broken. A love like this, it can't be outrun, not by distance, not by time. Stay close. Hit subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from, because I promise you this one will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. The storm raged, an endless torrent of wind and rain. Each gust seemed to push her further, forcing her body to move faster, pushing against the weight of her fear, the exhaustion that threatened to bring her down. Her feet stumbled over uneven ground, bloodied and bruised from the desperate run. The trees twisted above her, dark shadows dancing like specters in the chaos of the night. Her chest heaved, the air thick in her lungs. But something else was suffocating her, the sense that she was no longer alone. The first crack of thunder split the sky above, and then there was a silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. The wind dropped. The trees stood still. Her breath, ragged and shallow, felt too loud. Her body froze. Something was watching her. Her senses, sharpened by fear, screamed at her to move, to keep running, but the stillness paralyzed her. Every part of her screamed, warning her. But it wasn't the storm that had stopped. Something else, something far darker, had taken hold of the night. Then she heard it. A soft sound, a brush of movement against the ground, the crack of a twig breaking underfoot. A shadow moved in the distance, deep and thick against the darkened landscape. But it wasn't the storm that had caused it. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against her chest, a sense of dread rising up her spine like a wave. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. It was him, the alpha. And then, like a predator emerging from the dark, he stepped into the clearing. He was a silhouette at first, tall, imposing, his outline almost lost in the shadows. But as the storm parted slightly, her heart nearly stopped when his eyes found hers. The light didn't reach them fully, but there was a glow to his eyes, fierce, wild, like something ancient, something dangerous that had been waiting, watching. His gaze held her captive, pinning her to the spot like a trapped animal unable to move. His presence was a wave of heat in the cold, a searing thing that spread through her blood, straight to her core. Her throat tightened as she tried to find her voice. Why is he here? She knew why. Because he's never stopped hunting me. You didn't think you could run forever, did you? His voice was deep, rough, like it hadn't been used in a long time, like he had been waiting for this moment, for her. It was a voice that made her skin burn, even in the cold. He stepped closer, the sound of his boots heavy against the wet earth. Each step was deliberate, confident, powerful. He was a force of nature, dangerous, beautiful in a way that made her knees weak. How do you know my name? Her words came out hoarse, disbelief flooding through her. She didn't want to ask, but it slipped out. The question that had been eating at her the moment she realized he had been tracking her, watching her. His lips curled into something almost like a smile, but it wasn't kind. I know everything about you. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. She could feel it, the pull, the magnetism that called to her, that ignited something deep inside her, something she couldn't quite control. Her body wanted to step toward him, wanted to melt into him, but her mind screamed to run, to not fall for it again. She backed up, not trusting her legs, not trusting anything but the instinct to flee. Don't. His voice was softer now, but no less commanding. He didn't move, but his gaze never left her. I'm not going to hurt you. The words were almost a whisper, but they hit her like a tidal wave. Her heart was pounding now, not from fear of him, but from the confusion, the betrayal that she couldn't shake, that had settled deep in her chest. She didn't want to trust him. She couldn't, not after what he had done, after the years of silence, of pain. I don't want your help, she spat, the words cutting through the tension in the air, the anger, the hurt. The years of being abandoned, thrown away as if she meant nothing. She couldn't let it go. Not now. Not when she could still feel the sting of it all. He didn't flinch. He just watched her, eyes flickering in that way that made it feel like he was seeing straight through her. You think I'm here to rescue you? His voice was rough with something that sounded like pain. I'm not here to fix you. Her breath caught. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want him to say that word again, the word that made her feel small. Rescue. But he wasn't finished. I'm here because I never let you go. The words hit her harder than anything she'd felt in years, sending a shudder through her body. She wanted to scream, to push him away, to tell him that it was too late for that. That he had left her, abandoned her when she needed him the most, when she had been marked and cast aside, left in the cold without a single glance back. And yet she couldn't bring herself to turn away from him. He took another step forward, and this time she didn't move. You've been running from me for so long. His voice was lower now, thick with the weight of something buried deep within him, just as buried inside her. But I never stopped watching. Never stopped waiting. His words pierced her, and she wanted to run. But there was nowhere to go. The storm raged on, but everything around them seemed to disappear. It was just him and her, standing in the heart of a darkness that she couldn't escape. You... She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to ask why. Why had he done it? Why had he left her when she needed him most? but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Instead, all she could do was stand there, her pulse hammering in her ears, her heart beating so loud it might as well have been the only sound in the world. "You can still trust me," he said, but there was no guarantee in his voice. It was raw, broken, just like her. Her breath hitched. She could feel it, the pull between them. It was impossible. It was dangerous. But it was there. The undeniable connection that had always existed between them. She felt it more now than ever before. But how could she trust him again? How could she trust the one who had thrown her away? He was a storm inside her, a fire that she couldn't extinguish no matter how many times she ran from it. The tension between them was a wire pulled too tight, each word, each movement driving them closer to something neither of them was ready for. Her body screamed to pull away, to run, to save herself. But deep down, in the depths of her heart, she knew. She wasn't running anymore, and neither was he. This was the moment they both feared, and neither one of them knew how it would end. The night seemed to stretch on forever, the storm still raging above them, but something in the air had shifted. The trees around them towered like dark giants, their branches swaying like they were alive, and the silence between them felt thick, suffocating. Every step she took, every breath she forced into her lungs, felt like a battle. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the rejection, the power she could barely control, was pressing on her chest, making it harder to move. She couldn't run anymore. She had learned that lesson the hard way. And now, as she walked through the damp forest with the Alpha at her side, it was impossible to ignore the pull between them. It was like a magnet, something deep inside that drew her toward him, even though every instinct in her screamed to keep her distance. Her heart pounded with the fight inside her, the fear of letting herself get too close. But the truth was, she didn't know how to stop it. She couldn't. Her mind wandered back to the night everything had fallen apart, the night she'd been cast out by her pack. She'd known it was coming. She'd felt the change before it happened, the power stirring inside her, trying to break free. The Alpha had stood in front of her, his eyes cold and distant. The love between them, if it had ever really been there, burning away like smoke in the wind. "You're a danger to us now," he'd said, his voice flat, emotionless. "We can't control you anymore. You're a risk. You're a threat." That was it. That was all it took. In a single breath, everything she had known, everything she had fought for, was gone. She had tried to fight it, tried to fight him. The power inside her had surged to the surface, hot and furious like fire crawling beneath her skin. But she hadn't been ready. The Alpha hadn't been ready, and when she couldn't control it, when it nearly consumed her, they made their choice. She wasn't even given the chance to fight back. She was exiled, abandoned, and left to walk a path no one had ever prepared her for. The shame of that moment, the sting of rejection, never truly went away. It sat in the pit of her stomach, a constant reminder of what she had lost, what she had become. The power inside her, the thing they had feared, was now part of her. It was a part of who she was, something she couldn't escape no matter how far she ran. And she had run. For years she had kept running, moving from place to place, hiding from her past, hiding from the truth that had always followed her like a shadow. She'd convinced herself that she could outrun it all, the pack, the Alpha, the power that she couldn't control. But the truth? The truth was that she couldn't outrun who she was. And deep down, she knew it. She had known it the moment he stepped into her life again. Now, as she stood there, in the thick of the forest with him at her side, she could feel that same pull, stronger than ever before. He was the Alpha, the one she had once loved, the one who had rejected her, left her broken. He was here. And somehow, despite everything, she couldn't escape the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was still the one who could heal her. or destroy her. Her power flickered again, threatening to break free, and she cursed herself for even feeling it. The flame inside her, the force that had once been so terrifying to everyone around her, was still there, waiting, hungry. She couldn't trust it. She couldn't trust herself, and she sure as hell couldn't trust him. Not after everything, but every time their eyes met, every time his presence seemed to envelop her, the question crept back. Could she trust him again? Could she trust the one who had shattered her? The answer, she wasn't sure she was ready to face it. But one thing was clear. She wasn't the same girl she had been when he'd cast her out. She wasn't that scared little girl anymore, desperate for approval, desperate for love. She had survived, learned how to live with the power that was both her gift and her curse. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet. And now, as she walked through the night with the alpha at her side, she could feel the old emotions stirring again, the anger, the betrayal, and that damnable bond that tied them together. It was like a fire inside her. But it wasn't just the power. It was him. And as much as she hated it, as much as she wanted to shut it out, she knew the truth. She could never run from him. Not now. Not ever. The storm had subsided, but the storm inside her was just beginning. She didn't know if she could trust him again, didn't know if she could ever forgive him, but she also knew that the moment they crossed that line, there would be no turning back. The question wasn't just whether she could trust him, it was whether she could trust herself, because the woman who had been cast aside, the woman who had been broken, rejected, was not the same person who walked beside him now. She was something more, something stronger. And the alpha? He wasn't the same either. He had his own demons, his own secrets, and deep inside, she could feel that they were tied together in ways she couldn't quite understand. The question, though, wasn't what he had done to her. It was what she was willing to do now. What was she willing to become? The trees whispered in the night, their leaves rustling like the softest touch against her skin, but the forest was no longer a refuge, and neither was he. The air grew thick as they ventured deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller, the shadows longer, until the moonlight barely reached the forest floor. The oppressive weight of the night seemed to press in from every direction. The quiet was suffocating, broken only by the soft shuffle of their feet through the underbrush and the distant rustling of branches high above. Every step seemed to lead them further into a place that felt both familiar and foreign, as though the very earth beneath their feet was alive with secrets. She didn't want to admit it, but the deeper they went, the more the sensation of being watched crawled up her spine. Her heart beat a little faster with every step. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. There was something here, something ancient, something waiting. She could feel it in the air, crackling like static electricity, making her skin tingle. This wasn't just a place, it was a presence. His footsteps were measured, purposeful, as though he had been here before, as though he knew exactly where they were going. He didn't need to say a word. She could feel it. He was calm, as if this was all part of some plan he had long ago set into motion. His silence unsettled her, his indifference to the looming sense of fate that pressed upon them both, and yet she couldn't tear her gaze away from him. There was something in the way he moved through the forest, something in his bearing, that made her wonder if he had walked this path before, if he had known, long before she did, what this place was, what this moment meant. The trees opened up suddenly, and the path they were following led them to a clearing. The air here was different, still heavy, but infused with an energy she couldn't quite name. The ground was covered with ancient stones, worn down by centuries of time, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, a large weathered altar stood, its surface smooth from years of use. It was as if this place had been untouched by time itself. frozen in the moment it had first been created. She stepped forward, instinctively drawn to the altar, but her feet felt heavy. The weight of the moment was too much to ignore. The silence around them deepened, and for a moment it was as though the world itself had stopped spinning, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She turned to look at him, the Alpha, this man who had once been her everything, who had turned away from her without a second thought, the man who had haunted her for so long. But now, as they stood on the precipice of something far greater than either of them, she saw him differently. There was a tension in his body, a flicker of something in his eyes, something she hadn't noticed before. A fear, a hesitation. No, not fear, recognition. "You know this place," she whispered, though she already knew the answer. Her words were drawn from the depths of her chest, heavy with the weight of her unspoken question. His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward, reaching out to trace his fingers lightly over the surface of the altar. His touch was gentle, reverent. "This is where it all began," he said, his voice low, thick with an emotion she couldn't place. He looked up at her, but his gaze wasn't quite meeting hers. Instead, it was distant, as if his mind was elsewhere, lost in the past. "This is where they first spoke of you, where they spoke of the one who would come, the one who would carry the mark of the flame." Her pulse quickened. The words hit her like a physical blow, making her breath catch in her throat. The one who would carry the mark of the flame, the mark, the power. The thing that had always set her apart, the thing that had caused her exile, her rejection. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. She had always known she was different, but this was something else. This was a prophecy. Her mind reeled as she tried to process what he had said, but it was impossible to ignore the pull she felt toward the altar, toward the power in the air. It was like a call. Something deep inside her was answering. The Alpha's eyes met hers. Then, finally, and in them, she saw something she hadn't expected. Vulnerability. Pain. But beneath that, a flicker of hope. "You are the one, aren't you?" His voice was almost a whisper, his eyes searching hers for an answer he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The words hung between them like a weight too heavy to bear. She wanted to deny it, wanted to run far away from this place, from the truth that was slowly unspooling before her. But something inside her, something that had always been there, was beginning to understand. I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling, the truth more terrifying than she had ever imagined. "I don't know what I am anymore. I don't know who I am." He stepped closer, his presence like a storm building on the horizon, overwhelming and intense. The heat from his body was almost unbearable, his energy wrapping around hers in a way that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. He was a force of nature, powerful, untamed, and yet in that moment he was nothing more than a man standing in front of her, a man who had made his own mistakes, his own choices. "A mark of the flame," he repeated, almost to himself. "The child of fire, the one whose bloodline runs deeper than anyone ever understood. The one who is meant to change everything." Her chest tightened at his words. They didn't feel like a blessing. They didn't feel like something to be proud of. It felt like a curse. "I don't want this," she said, her voice quiet but filled with so much emotion that it felt like the ground beneath her might crack open. "I never asked for this. I never wanted to be—" She stopped herself, knowing there was no point in saying the words. She had wanted to be normal once. She had wanted to fit in. But all of that was a lie. The truth was she could never be normal. She could never fit in. She could never be like everyone else. And this, the prophecy, only made that clearer. He reached out then, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, and for a moment she was caught in the memory of a time when his touch had once brought comfort, a time when they had been together. But now? Now, his touch felt like it could burn her alive. "I didn't choose this for you," he said softly, his voice thick with something she couldn't quite name. "But I won't turn my back on you again. Not now. Not when you need me the most." Her breath hitched at his words, and she felt something shift inside her. Something deep, something dangerous. Was this really happening? Was he really standing there, offering her something she never thought she would get again? Redemption? Love? Or was it just another lie? She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that he had changed, that he wasn't the same Alpha who had abandoned her all those years ago. But this destiny that was pulling at her, this prophecy that was threatening to swallow her whole, wasn't something she could ignore. It was too big, too much. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. His eyes softened as they met hers, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his gaze, something real. A flicker of hope, a flicker of regret. "You don't have to do it alone." In that moment, everything changed. The prophecy wasn't just a story, it was her story, and no matter how hard she tried to run from it, the truth was undeniable. She was the one. And the flame inside her was only beginning to awaken. But could she embrace it? Could she accept the role that fate had given her? Could she stand at the edge of everything she had feared and finally step forward? The choice, for the first time, was hers to make. The air between them seemed to crackle, the quiet of the forest closing in around them as if holding its breath. Every step they took felt like a violation of the stillness, a warning that this fragile peace between them wouldn't last. The moment they had shared, their conversation hanging heavy with words unspoken, was shattered by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. It came first as a low rumble, barely audible, like a distant growl of thunder. But then the wind picked up, the temperature dropping so quickly that she felt it bite into her skin, sharp and cold, like the return of something long buried. Her senses flared to life in an instant, her heart hammering in her chest as the hairs on the back of her neck rose. She felt it first, a shift in the air, a pressure closing in from all sides. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of movement through the underbrush, low and deliberate, as if it had been tracking them, waiting. Her breath caught and she froze, the primal instinct kicking in, warning her to run, to hide. The Alpha, too, was alert now, his body tense, his gaze flicking toward the trees as though he, too, had sensed the change. His eyes, once soft with something like hope, were now sharp, the familiar coldness of command returning. But it wasn't fear she saw in his eyes. It was a kind of restraint. He had been expecting this. "You knew," she whispered, barely able to breathe the words. He didn't look at her, but she could see the tightening of his jaw, the way his posture shifted. He was preparing for a fight, his presence now larger than life, filling the air with a dangerous energy. She had always known the Alpha's power, his unshakable dominance, but now it was different. Now she could feel it, the weight of his past, the responsibility that crushed him. "It's not them I'm worried about," he said quietly, his voice grim. Before she could ask him what he meant, the answer came crashing through the trees. A howl, sharp, predatory, cut through the air. The sound of it chilled her, sending a rush of fear down her spine. It was a sound she had known too well. The pack. His pack. The first of them emerged from the trees, shadowy figures that moved with eerie grace, their eyes glowing in the moonlight like animals hungry for something more than a fight. They were wolves, but not just any wolves. These were the dissenters, the ones who had never accepted her, the ones who had cast her out. Their presence was an insult, a reminder of everything she had lost, And the moment she locked eyes with the first one, she knew. This wasn't just a fight for her. It was a fight for him, for his place. The alpha stepped in front of her, his body a wall between her and the pack, but his shoulders were tense, the weight of their presence pressing down on him. He didn't say a word, but she saw the internal struggle etched on his face. He was fighting against something inside himself, something that had always been there, buried beneath the power, beneath the responsibility. She could see it now. He wasn't just protecting her, he was torn. "You know what you have to do," one of the wolves growled, stepping forward. The voice was familiar, one she had heard before, a member of the pack who had always made her feel less than, a voice that echoed the rejection she had felt in her past. "She doesn't belong here, Alpha. She never has. You know the rules." Her heart sank, a cold wave of realization washing over her. The rules, the same rules that had condemned her before, the same rules that had cast her into the darkness. "You're wrong," the Alpha said, his voice low but laced with authority. "She is mine." The words stung. There was power in them, but there was also something else, a weight, a promise he had made long ago. And yet, despite the strength in his tone, she saw the hesitation in his eyes. He wasn't just speaking to them, he was speaking to himself. They had been here before, hadn't they? The same fight, the same divide, the pack, his people demanding that he choose them over her, demanding that he choose power over love. But it wasn't that simple. The second the Alpha spoke, the pack's stance shifted. The wolves circled them, their eyes never leaving her. They weren't just here to fight. They were here to remind him of his duty, his loyalty, and above all else, the pack. She could see it in their eyes. This wasn't personal. It was about order, about control. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't about her. It never had been. It was about him, his place in the world, his duty, his role as Alpha. His shoulders were tense, the internal battle he was fighting now plain for her to see. She could feel it, too, the weight of what was happening. The burden he carried wasn't just about protecting her. It was about choosing her, choosing love over loyalty. "She's a danger to us all," another wolf growled. He was smaller than the others, but his presence was no less intimidating. He looked at the Alpha like he had already made up his mind. "You're a fool if you think she can be a part of this pack, a rogue, banished. She has no place here, and neither do you if you keep her around." Her breath caught. She could feel the weight of those words sink deep into her chest, the sting of their truth. She was nothing to them, nothing but a threat, a weapon waiting to go off, a curse to everything they had built, a curse she couldn't escape. But it was the Alpha's words, the words he spoke next, that sent a shock through her entire body. "I will not choose between you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Not again." His words hung in the air between them like a challenge, a promise, a lie. He was torn, and she saw it. She felt it. The pack was pressing in now. The wolves moving closer, their eyes predatory, but the Alpha didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He stood his ground, the weight of the situation pulling him into a corner he didn't know how to get out of. Then, the first of the wolves lunged. A massive beast, its claws slashing through the air, aiming for the Alpha. But he was faster. His body moved with an effortless grace, twisting and dodging, his movements fluid and controlled. The fight had begun. The pack had decided. But it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, too. "Go," the Alpha hissed to her. His voice a low command. He was still looking at her, but his gaze was hardened, conflicted. "Get out of here." She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The fear that gripped her chest was as sharp as any blade. She wasn't afraid of the wolves. They were nothing compared to the internal battle she was watching unfold before her. She was afraid of what was happening to him, what he was doing to them. "You know I can't leave you," she said, her voice trembling, but her feet didn't budge. She couldn't just walk away. Not now, not when everything was falling apart. He turned to her then, his eyes filled with a strange mix of pain and determination. "You have to." But she couldn't. She wouldn't. "You promised," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. But in that moment, it felt like the entire world had stopped. The wolves were fighting, but her battle? It was internal. It was with him, and she had never felt so torn in her life. She was the one who was supposed to walk away, but in this moment she couldn't, and neither could he. The world was fighting back, but so were they. The sounds of the battle still echoed in the air as they stumbled away from the chaos, their steps heavy, their breath uneven. The pack had dispersed, retreating into the shadows of the forest, leaving behind the smell of blood and the bitter taste of unresolved tension. She could feel the remnants of the fight pulsing in the air, the oppressive weight of what had just happened settling in her chest. Her heart was still racing, but in the distance, the crackling of a fire reached her ears. The Alpha didn't speak as they walked toward it. There was nothing left to say. He didn't need to explain himself. She already knew. The choice had been made. And now, they were left with the aftermath. The fire flickered, its warm glow casting shadows on the trees around them. She felt the pull of it, the comfort it offered, but it wasn't warmth that she sought. Not anymore. It was answers. The answers that had always been just out of reach, the ones that had haunted her every step since she'd first met him. She sank down onto a log near the fire, her muscles sore, her body trembling from the fight and the adrenaline that still coursed through her veins. The firelight danced across her skin, making her feel raw, exposed. He sat beside her, just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. His presence still so strong, but now different, softened. And for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no tension in the air between them, just silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence she was used to. This wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't awkward. It was calm. The kind of calm that followed a storm. The kind of calm that only came when two people shared something unspeakable, something so deeply entwined in their souls that words became unnecessary. She didn't know how long they sat there, the fire crackling softly between them, the sounds of the night closing in around them. It was peaceful, but the peace was fragile. She could feel the weight of the words hanging between them, the questions that hadn't been answered. She wanted to ask him why. Why had he left her? Why had he rejected her when she needed him the most? But she couldn't. She couldn't ask that, not yet. She wasn't ready for the answer, not the answer she feared. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, breaking the silence at last, her voice soft, almost hesitant. He didn't look at her at first, his gaze fixed on the flames. She could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness in his posture. He was fighting something deep inside him. But then he turned to her, and his eyes, the same eyes that had once been full of anger, full of resolve, were now softer. They had a weight to them, a burden. "You don't have to say anything." His voice was quiet, low, as if he were speaking to her from a distance. "I know it's hard. I've made it hard." The words hung between them, the truth of them sinking in. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness, not yet. He was just acknowledging the pain, the mess that they were both tangled in. She didn't know if that made it better or worse. She glanced away, her gaze falling to the fire, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He had left her once. He had abandoned her when she had needed him the most. She'd never asked for his help, never wanted to be saved, but he had been everything to her once, her protector, her partner, her alpha. Now he was a stranger. Or was he? "I didn't want this," she said, her voice cracking. "Any of this." Her words were barely above a whisper, but he heard them. She knew he did. His eyes softened, and for a moment she felt as if the world had gone still. He reached out then, slowly, his hand resting just inches from hers, the warmth of his skin close enough that she could feel the pull. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. "I never wanted to let you go." His words, the honesty in them, struck her. His hand, though close, never moved closer. It was as though he was waiting for her to make the decision, to either pull away or allow herself to be pulled in, to trust him again. The air between them thickened, charged with something unsaid, something that neither of them was ready to face. The connection between them, the bond that had once been so effortless, now felt like a fragile thread. Her heart pounded, her pulse quickening with the intensity of the moment. She could feel the weight of it, of the attraction, of the past, of the possibility of a future that seemed both impossible and undeniable. She didn't want to admit it, but the pull was there, as strong as it had ever been. The heat in her veins was more than just the fire. They both felt it. The chemistry, the magnetic force that pulled them toward each other like a storm about to break. But could she trust him? Could she trust herself? She closed her eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. She could feel his presence next to her, the air between them thick with tension, but she wasn't ready. Not yet. Not after everything. Not after the betrayal, the heartache. But then, before she could pull away, before she could stop herself, she felt his fingers graze hers. It was a soft touch, just enough to send a shiver down her spine. His hand lingered there, waiting. Waiting for her to make a choice. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. He wasn't forcing her. He wasn't pushing her. He was simply there, offering her a choice, to let go of the past or to hold on to it forever. She turned to look at him, her gaze searching his face, looking for the man she once knew, looking for the man who had walked away from her, who had torn them apart. And for the first time, she saw him, really saw him, the man who had tried to be everything for everyone, the man who had carried so much on his shoulders, who had tried to be the alpha the pack needed, even if it meant losing the one person who had loved him unconditionally. "I see you," he said, his voice softer now, but stronger, more certain. "All of you." The words landed like a promise that, despite everything, despite the walls she had built, he could still see her. He saw past the power. He saw past the rejection. He saw past the anger. He saw the woman beneath all of it. And for the first time in so long, she felt understood, not just by him, but by herself. She wasn't the broken girl she had been when they first met. She wasn't the girl who had run away, who had let the power inside her consume her. She was stronger now. She was different. But could she trust him? Could she trust herself? The fire crackled between them, its warmth a soft contrast to the cold, the emptiness that had once filled her. She could feel it now, the pull. It was undeniable. She had never felt anything like it, and despite the doubt that still lingered in the back of her mind, she knew she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, neither was he. The air shifted again, and for the first time she wasn't afraid. The storm that had raged in her heart for so long began to settle. There was still a long way to go, still so much to face. But for now, in this moment, in the flickering warmth of the fire between them, it felt like enough. She reached for him then, her fingers brushing against his, and when their hands finally met, it was more than just a touch. It was a promise. A promise she wasn't ready to break, but she was ready to start again. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow through the thick canopy above, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground. The air was still, but a heaviness hung over the clearing, like the calm before a storm. She sat at the edge of the fire, the warmth from the flames doing nothing to settle the storm raging in her chest. It had been days since the battle, days since the confrontation with the pack, and though they had found brief moments of peace, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something darker, something that would tear the fragile truce between them apart. She could feel it now, the tension, the quiet before the storm. The Alpha stood a few paces away, his eyes distant, his posture rigid. They had said little to each other since their night by the fire, their bond still raw, still uncertain. She wanted to believe that things could be different, that they could rebuild what had been shattered. But there was a weight in the air, a pressing feeling that told her it wouldn't be that simple. She had been abandoned before. She had been cast aside like nothing. And deep down, she couldn't help but wonder if the same fate awaited her again. The crackling of the fire was the only sound for a long moment. But it was the sound of footsteps approaching that finally broke the silence. She turned her head slightly, her heart sinking as she saw the familiar faces emerge from the shadows. Familiar wolves, members of the pack who had once called her family. They moved with purpose, their eyes cold, their faces unreadable. She didn't need to ask why they were here. She knew. She could feel it. The betrayal, thick and suffocating, like a noose tightening around her throat. The Alpha didn't turn to face her immediately. His focus remained on the wolves, his jaw clenched. But she saw it. The hesitation in his body, the tightness of his posture. He was torn. The man she had once known, the man who had said he would stand by her, now stood at the edge of the abyss, his loyalty to her slowly eroding. One of the wolves, the one who had always hated her the most, stepped forward. His eyes were dark with contempt as he fixed his gaze on her, his lips curling into something like a sneer. "It's time," he said, his voice low, filled with malice. "She's a danger to us. She always has been." The words struck her like a slap. She felt them, deep in her chest, like a cold, sharp blade cutting through everything she had fought for, everything she had believed. She had known this moment was coming, had prepared herself for it. But even then, the pain was unbearable. The betrayal was suffocating. "She's not one of us anymore," another wolf spat, his tone venomous. "She's the one the prophecy warned about. Her power will destroy us all." Her blood ran cold. The prophecy, the words that had haunted her since she first heard them, whispered in the shadows of the pack. The words that had branded her as something other, as something dangerous. She had always known that she was different, but this was beyond what she had ever imagined. Her heart raced as the wolves closed in around her, their eyes filled with contempt, their judgment weighing down on her like 1,000 pounds of stone. Her power, the very thing that had once been her gift, her salvation, had become her curse. But then the Alpha's voice rang out, breaking through the tension like a crack of thunder. "Enough!" His voice was hard, his tone unyielding. But there was something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place, that made her stomach twist. "She is not your enemy." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he was still the man who had once protected her, the man who had promised to stand by her no matter what. But his words were hollow. The hesitation in his eyes betrayed him. The wolves didn't move. They didn't need to. The pack was a machine, one that had long since turned its back on her. She had never truly belonged. And now, with the prophecy hanging over her like a guillotine, there was no place for her here, no place for someone like her. The Alpha didn't speak again. He just stood there, watching her with something close to regret in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough to undo the years of hurt, the years of silence, the years of betrayal. Her chest tightened. The weight of it all crushing her as she felt the sting of tears threatening to break through. She wasn't weak. She wasn't going to cry. But the hurt was there, a raw wound that had never fully healed. "You always knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew what I was. You knew what I could become." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was in his silence. She could feel the power inside her stir, the flames of her bloodline waking once more. She had always been able to feel it, to control it, but never fully. The more she tried to hold it back, the more it clawed at her, desperate to break free. And now, it was here. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the fire flickering at the edges of her vision. She could hear the faint whispers of the prophecy, the words that had haunted her, the ones that had always been meant for her. The one with the mark, the child of the flame. The words burned through her, igniting something deep within her. She felt the power rising like a tide, threatening to overwhelm her. She had never let it go this far, never let it consume her, but now she didn't care. She couldn't stop it. She turned toward the Alpha, her eyes meeting his. "I don't belong here." The words were a release, a final acceptance of what she had always known. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't the Alpha's mate. She wasn't anything anymore. And it was time for her to leave. But as she turned to walk away, she felt it. The surge of power that had been building inside her broke free. The fire inside her ignited in an instant, and with it, everything around her seemed to change. The air thickened, the temperature rising as the flames of her power surged outward, twisting around her like a vortex, a storm of raw, untamed energy. The wolves recoiled, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies stiff with the knowledge of what was happening. The Alpha stepped forward, but she didn't care. She was beyond caring. She was the prophecy now. She was the flame, and there was no going back. The world around her seemed to split in two some as her power surged. Her vision blurred, her senses overloaded as the fire inside her burned, hotter, brighter. She could feel the air crackle with energy, the earth itself trembling beneath her feet. The power that had once terrified her was no longer something she feared. It was something she embraced. Her heart raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she turned to face the pack one last time. The wolves stood there, their eyes wide with terror, and the Alpha, he stood there. His face etched with something that was far too close to regret. But it was too late. She wasn't the one who needed saving. She was the one who had been holding herself back. And now, she would never stop. Her flames roared to life, burning brighter than the stars above. And as she stepped into the fire, she knew that there was no going back. The world trembled. It started as a whisper at first, just a soft tremor beneath her feet. But then the ground itself seemed to groan, the earth shuddering in response to the power she had unlocked. She could feel it, the raw energy coursing through her veins, a force that was as old as the earth itself, as deep as the ocean, as burning as the stars. It was unstoppable in a way that terrified her and empowered her all at once. The flames within her no longer felt like a burden, no longer felt like a curse. They were her birthright, her destiny, and she was ready to claim them. She stood at the center of the clearing, her eyes glowing with a light that burned like silver fire. The wolves stood around her, frozen, their eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't them she was focused on. It wasn't the Alpha either. No. Her gaze was locked on the one thing that had been haunting her since she first felt the power surge within her. The prophecy, the fear, the betrayal. And now, standing at the precipice of everything she had ever feared, she had a choice. She could fight. She could reclaim her place in this world, or she could allow them to continue believing she was just a tool, just a sacrifice. But she had never been anyone's sacrifice. With every breath, the power inside her grew. The silver flames began to ripple beneath her skin, licking at her arms, her chest, her face. Each flicker of light a testament to the strength that had been buried within her for so long. The wind picked up again, but this time it was no longer a whisper. It It was a storm, howling and fierce, like the breath of the earth itself coming alive. The trees swayed violently as if they were bowing to her, the air crackling with electricity, charged with the energy of something ancient, something that had been waiting for her to rise. And then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a familiar shape, one she had once feared, one she had once loved, the Alpha. His face was hard, his body tense, but his eyes, they were searching hers, searching for something he had lost, something he had pushed away. "Don't do this," he said, his voice a low growl, desperate, pleading. "This isn't you. You can't control it. You don't have to destroy everything." His words stung, as though they were coated in a venom she could taste. They were meant to stop her, to make her doubt. But they didn't. Not anymore. She was no longer the girl who had run, the girl who had been abandoned, thrown away like trash. She was no longer the girl who had been rejected by her own pack, torn apart by betrayal. She was something more now, something stronger, something that could no longer be caged. "I am not your sacrifice," she said, her voice rising, the power within her swelling like the tide. The flames within her burst to life, a bright silver fire that shone like a second sun, lighting the night. "And I will not let you use me like that again." The earth shook beneath her feet, and a roar of energy surged outward, a shock wave that sent the wolves staggering back. The ground cracked open in the distance, lightning flashing in the sky, and the air was alive with power. Her bloodline, her heritage, surged forward, and she embraced it fully, feeling the weight of the ancestors behind her, their voices whispering to her, urging her on. The Alpha didn't move. His gaze was locked on her, his face a mask of uncertainty, of fear. And she could feel it. He didn't want this. He didn't want her to claim the power that was hers. He wanted to control it, to control her. But that was a part of him she had left behind. She wasn't his to control anymore. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his voice trembling now, his hand reaching out to her, desperate. But she didn't reach for him. She didn't need him. She didn't need anyone. The wolves were silent, their eyes wide with shock as they watched her. They didn't understand what she had become, what she was capable of. None of them did. The Alpha was still standing, still watching her, but she could see it in his eyes now. He was afraid. And that fear, that hesitation, made her heart ache. He had always been the one to protect her, to make her feel safe. But now it was her turn to protect herself, to protect them all. And then, just when she thought the moment couldn't get more charged, more intense, something shifted. The ground beneath her cracked again, and from the earth itself something else began to rise. Something darker, something more ancient than she could have imagined. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It wasn't a wolf, not fully. It was something older, something primal, a creature with eyes like embers, glowing with an intensity that burned through the night. The creature's form rippled, shifting between human and wolf, a terrifying blend of power and rage. It was a shadow beast, a creature from the depths of legend, one that had been bound for centuries, waiting for a time like this. The Alpha stepped back, his eyes widening in shock. No, it can't be. The Dark One. The name hit her like a punch to the gut, a name that was older than any of them, a name tied to the prophecy she had tried to ignore. The Dark One. The ancient force that had been sealed away, the very creature whose return would bring about the end of everything. And now, it was here. The creature's roar shattered the night, a bone-rattling sound that shook the very earth beneath her feet. Its power was overwhelming, a force so pure and untamed that even the Alpha stepped back, his confidence faltering for the first time. Her heart raced. But something deep inside her, something deep in her soul, knew what she had to do. "I won't let you destroy this world," she said, her voice steady, resolute. And then she let go. She let the power she had been hiding, the silver flames of her bloodline, explode from her, pushing out into the world around her like an unstoppable wave. The air around her shimmered with energy, the ground beneath her shaking as the silver fire swirled and danced around her, the flames twisting and spiraling into the air, lighting up the entire forest. She felt the ancients behind her, their power flowing through her veins, and she let it guide her, let it take control. She was the prophecy. She was the one who had been chosen. She was the flame. The Dark One charged, its massive form hurtling toward her, its eyes blazing with rage. But she stood her ground. She raised her hands, and the silver fire erupted in a burst of light so intense that it nearly blinded her. The creature screamed in fury, its form writhing, as though the flames were searing into its very soul. It didn't stand a chance. The Dark One recoiled, its body twisting in agony as the flames consumed it. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The creature was not dead. It was simply weakening, bending to her will, but not defeated. Not yet. The air was charged with energy, the tension so thick it felt like the world was holding its breath. The Alpha, standing at the edge of the clearing, watched her, his eyes wide with awe and something else, something deeper, darker, fear. He had underestimated her, and now the game had changed. She had claimed her power, and the world, his world, would never be the same again. But as the Dark One faltered, the shadows shifted once more, and she felt a presence rising, something even darker, even more dangerous. The final battle was far from over, but for the first time, she was ready. She had embraced her power. She had claimed it, and nothing, not even the Dark One, could take it from her now. The flames burned brighter now, their silver light flickering in the midnight air, casting eerie shadows across the clearing. The forest, once so full of life, now felt silent, as if the world itself was waiting for something. Everything, every breath, every heartbeat seemed to hang suspended in time. She had done it. She had summoned the power. She had fought back the darkness that threatened to consume them all. But at what cost? Her chest rose and fell with the weight of her victory, but there was no joy in it, no triumph. The fire within her burned hot and fierce, but it felt hollow, as though it was just the beginning. There was more than just the enemy standing before her, more than just the prophecy that had been forced upon her. The fire was inside her, and she had learned the hard way that it could be both a savior and a destroyer. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the power that thrummed beneath her skin. She had held it back for so long, had kept it hidden, afraid of what it might do, what it might become. But now it was undeniable. The flames, the power, it had always been a part of her. And though it burned, though it scorched her from the inside out, she could no longer pretend it wasn't real. She glanced toward him, the Alpha. He was standing a few feet away, his gaze fixed on her, his face unreadable, but she could see it in his eyes, something deeper, something torn. His body was still, but there was a storm behind his eyes. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. His voice was raw, hoarse, as though it cost him everything to say it. She looked away. Her breath hitched, but the words, her words, stayed locked inside her. She had fought for so long, struggled against the fire that consumed her, and now she couldn't even bring herself to trust the one person who had once been everything to her, the one person who had cast her aside and then returned when it suited him. But what about now? What was he really asking? Was he asking her to come back? To trust him again? Or was he asking for something else? Something that would once again bind her to him? something that would make her a prisoner to the very power she had fought to control. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and she could feel it, the weight of the decision. Would she choose him, choose his world, choose to bend to a future that had never truly been hers? Or would she turn away, embrace the fire that was inside her, and let it consume everything that stood in her way? "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice breaking, the question raw, unfiltered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers, as if waiting for her to come to a decision that she hadn't even begun to make. His hand reached for hers, but she didn't take it. She couldn't. Not yet. "I want you to choose," he said, the weight of the word falling between them. His voice was stronger now, more certain. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her question whether he truly understood what it meant. And that was the problem, wasn't it? He didn't understand. He never had. He saw her as something to protect, something to control. He had never seen her for what she was, a force in her own right, a force that was as unpredictable and as wild as the flames she carried within her. The fire inside her began to flicker, rising and falling like a storm on the horizon, a reminder of what she had learned. The power wasn't a gift to be controlled. It was a truth that had to be embraced. Would she choose him? Would she choose the alpha who had once abandoned her and now wanted to claim her once more? Or would she choose herself? Would she choose to walk alone, the flames her only companion, the world around her, nothing but a backdrop to the destruction she could bring? The alpha stepped closer, his hand outstretched, his voice softer now. "You don't have to do this alone." But those words that once would have brought her comfort, now felt like chains. She had walked alone for so long. She had learned that the only thing she could trust was the fire inside her, the power she had fought to control. And as much as it terrified her, she knew the truth. The fire wasn't just a part of her. It was her. "I can't be what you want me to be," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her heart was pounding now, a surge of emotion rising from the depths of her chest, but she wasn't sure if it was pain or relief. The silence between them stretched, the tension thickening, and for a brief moment the world seemed to hold its breath. "Then what will you be?" he asked, his voice gentle. But the weight of it hung heavy in the air. He wasn't asking her to answer, he was asking her to decide. Her gaze flicked to the flames, the silver fire that burned so brightly within her, casting long shadows on the ground. She could feel it. Feel the power coursing through her veins. It was both beautiful and terrifying. It was her, and yet it was still so foreign. Would she choose him? Would she choose to give up everything she had fought for, everything that had made her who she was? Or would she choose to stand on her own? Would she choose the flames? She looked up at him, her heart heavy, her chest tight with the weight of the decision she knew she had to make. The words she wanted to say were caught in her throat, but they wouldn't come. She wasn't ready to say goodbye to the alpha, not yet. She wasn't ready to turn away from the one person who had once meant everything to her. But the fire inside her burned too brightly to ignore. She couldn't hold it back any longer. "I'm not your sacrifice," she said, her voice steady now, her gaze unwavering. For the first time in a long time, she felt it. The surge of power, the surge of her true self. She wasn't his to claim, not anymore. The ground beneath them cracked once more, the earth shuddering beneath the weight of what was about to happen. The wind howled around them, and the flames of her power blazed higher, swirling like a tornado of silver fire. The air was alive, charged with energy. The world seemed to shift, its balance teetering on the edge, and in that moment the truth settled deep in her soul. She was the fire. She had always been the fire, and no one could control it but her. Would you have chosen her or feared her too? Is she a hero or just a girl cursed with too much fire? If this story lit something inside you, if you felt the heat of her flames, if her journey burned into your soul, then stay with us. Subscribe to Kismet Publishing Collection, because here we tell tales that burn. The flames of her power burned brighter than ever, casting long shadows that stretched out into the night. The heat from the fire, once sharp and searing, now simmered into a low hum, like the pulse of something ancient, something vast. Deep beneath her skin, she could feel it, the power that had always been a part of her, but had only now been fully embraced. It wasn't just fire, it was her. Every flicker, every spark, was a reflection of the woman she had become. Her chest still rose and fell with the weight of everything that had transpired, the battle, the loss, the raw, unrelenting power that surged through her veins. The Alpha stood beside her, his presence still as overwhelming as the storm that had once raged between them. But now there was distance between them, more than just physical space. The silence that hung in the air was thick, suffocating, each of them lost in their own thoughts, their own questions. He didn't speak, neither did she. Their journey together had always been a twisted path, and she knew that it wasn't over. Not yet. But where would it lead? The fire in her chest was only a glimpse of what was to come. The truth of the prophecy, the curse, the power was still unraveling, and she was at its center, whether she wanted to be or not. The night seemed to close in around them, the sounds of the forest, once so alive, now eerily silent, as though the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Waiting for the next chapter to begin. Suddenly the ground beneath their feet trembled again. It was a subtle shift at first, nothing more than a vibration that hummed through the soles of their boots. But then it grew, the earth shaking with a force that couldn't be ignored. The ground cracked, just slightly at first, but then a deep rumble began to fill the air, like something stirring beneath the surface of the world. She stopped, her heart pounding in her chest as her instincts flared. She wasn't alone. She never had been. She could feel it now. The weight of something moving in the darkness, something ancient, something dark. The Alpha stiffened beside her, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the shadows. He had felt it too. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders tightened, as though he was preparing for something even darker than what they had just fought. Then, through the silence, a voice emerged. A voice so low, so dark, it seemed to seep from the very shadows themselves. She is not the only one. The words were a whisper, barely audible, but they struck her like lightning. The blood in her veins froze. Her gaze shot to the Alpha, but his expression was unreadable. He had heard it too, and yet there was no recognition in his eyes. No answer. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, with weight, with something else, something dangerous. The ground trembled again, as though the very world around them was reacting to the voice, to the warning that had just been uttered. And in that moment she felt it, the power, the pull of something far greater than what she had known, than what she could control. The Alpha turned toward the source of the voice, but it was too late. The shadows had already retreated, leaving nothing but the rustling of the leaves and the eerie calm that followed. Her heart raced, but it wasn't fear she felt. It was anticipation, a sense that she was standing on the edge of something bigger, something she couldn't yet comprehend. The prophecy had never been just about her. It had never been about a single girl, a single fire. It was about something far older, far more dangerous. The fire within her flickered, then surged again as if responding to the warning. The true Alpha. The voice echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, relentless, warning her of something she had yet to face. She looked at the Alpha, her heart still racing. There were no words left to say, no explanations that could make sense of what had just happened. Her power, her past, her future, none of it seemed clear anymore. There was only the unknown, the new path she would have to walk, alone or not, and the force that had just whispered its presence into her world. But the Alpha? He hadn't moved, hadn't said anything since that final warning had slipped into the night. She could feel his gaze on her, but now it was distant, like the Alpha she had known was lost to something darker. And in that moment she realized he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was a part of the storm now. He was standing on the edge with her. The air felt thicker now, the silence louder. She could hear her own breath, the beating of her own heart, as though the entire world had fallen away. She could feel the tension building inside her chest, the weight of the fire still swirling, still eager to break free. But she wasn't sure it was her own power anymore. It was as though the flames were calling her, urging her forward to something, to someone. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice strained but determined. She didn't wait for a response. She couldn't. Not now. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew it was too dangerous to stay here. The Alpha turned to face her, his face shadowed in the moonlight, and for the first time, she saw the true weight of what was happening in his eyes, the burden of the prophecy, the weight of the power he had denied, the weight of the future that neither of them could escape. "We'll go," he said softly, his voice steady but hollow. He was resigned to it, resigned to the fact that there was no running anymore, not from what was coming, not from the past, not from her. They turned away from the ruins of the clearing, walking away from the echoes of the voice that still haunted the night. The fire in her chest burned brighter. But it wasn't enough. She wasn't sure it ever would be. Not when there was more to face, more to understand. And as they walked away, the world trembled again. There was more to come. The shadows had not revealed everything. This isn't over. There were answers yet to be found. The fire wasn't done burning, and the true Alpha, whoever that might be, was still out there, waiting. The question was no longer whether she could control the fire within her. It was whether she could survive the storm that had only just begun. Stay close. Stay with us. Because this is just the beginning. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. And with that, the screen fades to black. The world waiting to see what happens next.